Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we take those really dense fundamental source materials and try to boil them down into pure, actionable insight.
Yeah, get right to the core.
Exactly. And today, we are wrestling with some huge questions. I mean, monumental stuff that sits right at the heart of theology, cosmic structure, you name it.
Hmm.
We're looking at sources that treat the whole story creation, sin, redemption, not as like God making it up as he goes along.
Right, not improvisation.
No, but as this meticulously pre-scheduled plan, a blueprint, really, set
Yeah.
in motion way before the world even began as we know it anyway.
It's a really profound deep dive today because it forces us, really, to rethink that familiar Genesis story we all sort of grew up with.
Yeah, definitely.
We're kind of moving past the idea that the fall was just this unexpected disaster.
Right? Like, oops.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And instead, we're looking at it as maybe a necessary structural step, something built into a much larger, deliberate divine plan.
Well,
So we'll be tackling things like, the identity of the first Adam versus the last Adam, this really challenging idea of how divine foreknowledge actually works with creature free will.
which seems like a contradiction.
It does. And also the ethical need, you could say, for public judgment for the whole cosmos.
Okay, so let's unpack this then. Our goal today, our mission for this deep dive, is to synthesize these materials. We want to see how the creation and, the failure of the first Adam were actually integral.
Necessary, even.
Necessary. A non-negotiable prerequisite, really, for the ultimate victory and the establishment of the last Adam, the Messiah.
Mhm.
So we're focusing on three big concepts, all connected. First, that pivotal relationship, the distinction, but also the connection between the two atoms.
Right.
Second, this really surprising detail about where the first atom was actually created. That one's a bit of a shocker.
It really is. It changes things.
And third, how God's absolute knowledge, his foreknowledge, somehow completes rather than, cancels out human autonomy. Getting into the mechanics of that.
Yeah, the theological nuts and bolts. It's going to be good.
All right, so let's dive right in. And we kind of have to start with what the sources say about Adam's origin story because, well, it's maybe the most jarring detail right off the bat.
That really sets a different stage.
Yeah, because when we think of Adam's creation, we picture, the Garden of Eden,
Mhm.
sunlight, maybe some pristine dust.
Paradise. Innocence.
Exactly. But these sources we're looking at, they give this, frankly, jaw-dropping detail. It completely recontextualizes Adam's whole assignment from moment one.
Hmm.
They state quite clearly that God created the first Adam not in Eden,
Right.
but in a place of previous confinement, in Hades.
Yeah.
Where this figure, the sources call him Satan Garad, or just Satan, was apparently already in prison.
And that just changes everything, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About Adam's initial mission. He wasn't created in this, perfect vacuum of innocent paradise.
No.
The stage for his entrance, his very existence, was already set within the boundaries of a previous cosmic judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Spiritual confinement was already a reality.
So humanity's beginning, if this source is right, was tied directly to the fallout of a prior rebellion.
It suggests Adam's life wasn't just, a simple test of obedience, don't eat the fruit. It was more like a targeted response to an existing cosmic problem.
Okay, but wait. If the whole point of creation was ultimately leading to the glorification of the last Adam,
Yeah.
why kick off the first attempt, the first Adam, in a place linked with the failure of Lucifer, the Satan figure? Why not start clean, pristine?
Well, the implication of the sources seems to be that Adam's purpose was bigger than just obedience. It was twofold, maybe.
Okay.
Not just exercising free will, but also ultimately inheriting everything, the entirety of space-time, including these boundaries between the spiritual and the temporal.
Ah, okay.
So by creating him in that specific context where he's immediately confronted with the consequences of rebellion, he's put straight onto mission territory.
Right. The stakes are high from the get-go.
Exactly. It establishes the high stakes of his obedience right away.
Yeah.
He's created more in a war zone than a sanctuary, if you think about it like that.
Wow. Okay. That definitely makes the crisis that follows, the fall in Genesis, feel even more structurally significant. It wasn't just a stumble.
No. And after the fall, God drives Adam out of the garden. The sources really emphasize the reason for that expulsion, pulling from Genesis. It was to stop Adam.
From getting to the tree of life.
Right. Preventing him from taking that fruit and living forever, but in his new corrupted, fallen state.
That makes sense. So the expulsion wasn't just punishment, like get out.
Less vindictive punishment, more necessary quarantine. Yeah. Think about it. If he'd achieved biological immortality in that state of spiritual death.
It would have locked evil into creation permanently.
Exactly. solidified it.
Okay.
So the cherubim, the flaming, revolving sword, they weren't just blocking the way back to Eden. They were guarding the way to eternal life itself.
Making sure that only the right path, the proper consecrated way.
The atonement place, yeah, could eventually be used.
Okay. And the mechanism for Adam's fall, the actual eating of the forbidden fruit. The sources say that was the trigger for his spiritual development, self-realization.
Precisely. The tree of knowledge of good and evil basically acted like a diagnostic tool.
Huh.
By eating it, he performed the physical act that forced him, finally, to confront his internal spiritual reality.
Good.
We realized he was an idolater. He understood right then that he loved Eve, the creature, more than he loved God, the creator.
Wow.
That violates the absolute central commandment of devotion. The physical act, the disobedience, was just the symptom of that deeper internal devotion problem.
So the real tragedy wasn't just losing the perfect garden home.
No, the sting was realizing his spiritual bankruptcy, that he'd fundamentally failed the primary relationship test he was created for.
Okay.
And that profound self-realization, which the principle of divine expectation would only confirm later, that was the moment Adam truly understood he was a dead man, spiritually speaking.
But paradoxically, that realization was necessary.
Yes. It was the necessary step that finally turned his focus completely towards the possibility of eternal life. He suddenly got it. He understood why the tree of life was so important.
And he realized he couldn't get it on his own.
Exactly. He saw his own hopelessness, and the law just reinforces that, acting like a schoolmaster pointing him relentlessly towards the future solution. The last Adam.
So the immediate result of sin was understanding the immediate need for redemption.
Perfectly put.
And our sources then lay out the path forward pretty clearly, don't they? For the first Adam and, well, all of us descended from him to get that eternal life, or yung sang, as the sources call it.
They do. The path is explicit. The first Adam has to pass through the atonement place, that sacred space guarded by the cherubim.
A flaming sword.
Symbolizing the necessary judgment, yeah. To get rid of the sin inside him, to regain life, he must pass through the substitutionary atonement provided by the last Adam. There's no other way.
His whole existence after leaving Eden is defined by looking forward to that single point of sacrifice.
That's the only way back.
Okay, so if the first Adam story is defined by that necessary failure, the one that revealed just how deep his need was,
Yeah.
then the last Adam is all about completion, about willing sacrifice. Our sources are clear. The first Adam wasn't just like the guy before him.
No, not just a predecessor.
He was the passage, the appointed channel almost, through which the last Adam, who the sources identify as the second person of the Godhead, could actually enter our space-time.
This is so critical to understand. The second person of the Godhead didn't just, magically appear.
Right.
The sources use that really powerful language from Philippians 2 about Christ willingly emptying himself. Kenosis.
Which means more than just putting on a human body.
Oh, much more. It's described as a planned, voluntary self-limitation, containing himself within the boundaries of humanity, of time, all necessary to fulfill this covenant that was apparently laid out right at the foundation of creation.
Wow.
The last Adam is like the completion piece, designed perfectly to fit into the structural failure, the hole left by the first Adam.
Okay. And once he arrived, once the last Adam was here in space-time, what was the scope of that completion plan? What were his main jobs, the tasks the first Adam couldn't do?
The sources lay out 4 primary tasks, really. And they show he's more than just a savior figure. He's like a cosmic finisher.
Okay, what are they?
First, he comes to fully inherit space-time, to exercise the sovereignty, the rulership that the first Adam forfeited. You see that in Matthew 28, all authority.
Right. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me.
Exactly. Second, he has to complete the image of God in the first Adam. Adam was made in the image, but it wasn't finished. It was marred. The last Adam brings that image to perfection, to conformity, ultimately to glory.
Okay. Inheriting space-time, completing the image. What else?
Third, he must prove the truth of the commandment. Remember, the sources stress the first Adam failed because he loved his family, Eve, more than God.
Right, the idolatry point.
So the last Adam had to demonstrate the correct hierarchy of devotion, that loving God absolutely is possible and necessary, even if it leads to death.
He modeled perfect obedience.
Perfectly. And finally, the fourth task kind of sums it all up. He must complete creation itself. Bring the whole temporal structure, the whole project, to its originally designed, intended goal.
Finishing the job.
Finishing the job.
That structural role leads to one of the most, well, poignant comparisons in the sources, I thought. The parallel sacrifices.
Ah, yes. The two Adams both dying because of love.
But the kind of love, the object of it, makes all the difference cosmically.
It's a profound contrast, isn't it? The first Adam died spiritually first, then eventually physically because he loved Eve. But that love became idolatry, sin, prioritizing the creature over the creator.
So his death was the consequence of his own wrongdoing.
His transgression, yeah. But the last Adam dies physically and, importantly, voluntarily because he loved the first Adam and, by extension, everyone he represents, the church. Ephesians 5 talks about this.
Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her.
Exactly. So it's not just about dying.
Mhm.
It's the reason for the death, the motivation.
Okay, explain that difference more.
The critical point is the origin of the death and who it's for. The first Adam died because of his own sin. The last Adam dies because of the first Adam's sin.
Ah, substitution.
Perfect substitution. The second sacrifice takes the consequence that the first one incurred, basically breaking that quarantine enforced by the cherubim and the sword.
And this substitution also connects back to the garden in another way, doesn't it? The sources draw a direct line between the last Adam and that original tree of life.
They do, absolutely. The last Adam is explicitly identified as the tree of life itself. John 15, I am the vine.
You are the branches.
Right. Remember, the cherubim were guarding access to the tree of life, blocking fallen man from eternal existence in that state.
So the path back isn't a place or a ritual.
It's a person, the Messiah. The last Adam is the tree. Therefore, the only way for the first Adam and us to get eternal life is to be radically changed, transformed.
To be born again.
Born again, exactly, through the last Adam. John 3.5 is key there. The journey back to life needs a complete change of identity, becoming part of him.
So, putting it all together, the first Adam's necessary failure created this vacuum.
Yeah.
And the last Adam's intentional, loving sacrifice not only filled that vacuum, but actually secured the completion of the whole original plan.
That's the picture the sources paint. A perfectly designed rescue and completion. Okay, so this naturally leads us into maybe the toughest part intellectually, the most challenging bit in these sources.
Yeah, this is where my brain starts to hurt a little.
Mine too. It's reconciling this tension between God's absolute total knowledge of everything and genuine free will for creatures like us and angels.
How can our choices be truly free if God already knows exactly what we're going to choose?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it?
Right. And the sources, they start by establishing the timeline. This isn't God guessing.
No, it's foundational. God knew about the fall of Lucifer, that figure they sometimes call hell, and he knew about the fall of Adam before the foundation of the world.
Jeremiah 1.5, 1 Peter 1.19. The texts are cited. This foreknowledge is presented as total, absolute, no surprises for God.
But here's what's central to the source material. The purpose of creation, given that foreknowledge. Why bother creating if you know some will fail?
Okay.
The sources argue that creation was started with the specific goal of completing the free will of creatures, bringing it to its fullest expression and validation.
Completing free will. How?
Specifically through the mechanism of the cross. The whole system, choice, consequence, grace, judgment, her study. It wasn't designed to limit our autonomy, but somehow to perfect it and, crucially, validate it publicly.
Okay, that still feels like a paradox. How can God know every choice I'll ever make, but my choice still be meaningful to me? He knows who obeys, who rebels before they even exist.
Right. But the key is the creature, angel or human, does not know their own ultimate fate. 1 Samuel 16.7, man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. We don't have that perfect self-knowledge or future knowledge.
We live in the uncertainty of the choice.
Exactly. And this is where the sources offer a mechanism, a way to reconcile God's sovereignty and our freedom. It's described as essentially divine stage management.
Stage management.
Based on his complete knowledge of every possible decision tree for every potential creature, God knows what creature X would choose in situation Y.
Huh?
Therefore, God puts the specific creature, the one he knows, will make a certain choice needed for the plan.
Into the specific situation required to fulfill that plan.
Precisely.
Okay, let's use the Pharaoh example the sources bring up from Romans 9. God uses Pharaoh's hard heart to show his power. But if God knew Pharaoh would harden his heart, did Pharaoh really have a choice in that moment?
According to these sources, yes, he did. Pharaoh was a specific person with a specific pre-known character, a tendency towards rebellion, pride. God didn't make him rebel right then.
He didn't zap his heart.
No,
Yeah.
God selected the creature he already knew would, by his own nature and inclination, choose rebellion when faced with God's demands. And he placed that specific person in that specific historical situation to fulfill the divine schedule of judgment and deliverance.
And the sources suggest, like with Cyrus and Isaiah, that if that Pharaoh had been inclined to obey.
God would have simply selected a different potential Pharaoh, Pharaoh B, the one he knew would rebel, to fill that necessary role of resisting judgment. The outcome for God's plan was certain, but it respected the creature's inherent chosen path.
Okay, so it's not coercion of the will, it's the strategic selection of a creature whose known free will aligns with a needed step in the plan.
That's the argument. The creature keeps their free will, but God, knowing the outcome of that free will in advance, decides the cosmic relevance and purpose of that choice.
How it fits into the bigger picture.
Exactly. That's where the potter and the clay analogy from Romans 9 comes in handy, as the sources explain it.
Right, who are you, oh man, to talk back to God?
The clay, that's the creature, chooses its own consistency through its responses. Does it remain soft and receptive, or does it harden itself in rebellion?
It chooses its own nature.
Yes. But the potter god, knowing the clay's final state, then decides the purpose for that resulting vessel. If the clay insists on being hard, it's designated as a vessel for destruction, demonstrating justice. If it remains soft and receptive, it's designated as a vessel for honor, demonstrating mercy.
Wow. Okay, that makes a kind of sense. But it leads straight to the next big question, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The one the sources have to answer for God's justice to hold up.
Which is?
If God knows the outcome anyway, why the delay? Why go through the whole messy process of history? Why wait for us creatures to actually make the choices he already knows we'll make?
Yes. Why not just judge instantly based on the foreknowledge, create and sort immediately?
Right. Why the performance?
And the answer the sources give is absolutely critical for, well, everything. For the stability of the entire cosmos, the judgment must be public and it must manifest in time.
Why public?
Because if God just created creatures and then immediately destroyed the ones he foreknew would sin, based only on his unseen internal knowledge, think about how that would look to other creatures.
Like the angels or future generations.
Exactly. They wouldn't see the reason. God's actions might look arbitrary, maybe even cruel or capricious. He'd be fundamentally misunderstood.
And that misunderstanding would undermine the whole point.
Completely. If God acts solely on unrevealed knowledge, his justice can't be appreciated or affirmed by the creation. So the sources hammer this home. Judgment has to be public. 1 Timothy 5.24, some sins are obvious, going ahead to judgment, others trail behind.
It has to play out.
It has to play out so the tangible, undeniable reason for both salvation and condemnation is displayed for all to see. This ensures God's love and his justice are totally transparent, fully revealed. It proves every outcome was rooted in the creature's own freely exercised will.
The cosmic courtroom needs to see the evidence.
That's a great way to put it.
Oh.
All right, now let's take that whole complex idea of foreknowledge and apply it directly to the concept of grace. And honestly, this might be the most provocative part of this entire deep dive.
Okay, I'm braced.
The sources state it pretty plainly. Yes, free will is granted, but creatures, just by our own limited power, our own inherent nature after the fall, we cannot obey God perfectly. It's impossible on our own steam.
So obedience requires something more.
It requires divine empowerment. It requires grace. 1 Corinthians 15.10, by the grace of God I am what I am. Obedience is only possible through God's enabling power.
And grace, as Ephesians 2.8 says, is fundamentally a gift. It's unmerited.
Absolutely. But, crucially, the creature still retains the free choice to either accept that offered grace or to reject it. You see that in places like 2 Corinthians 6.1, urging people not to receive God's grace in vain, or Ezekiel 18.31, cast away from you all your transgressions, get yourselves a new heart.
The choice remains, accept or reject the gift.
And that choice, accepting or rejecting the offered grace, that's the hinge. That's what every creature's eternal fate ultimately turns on, according to these sources.
Okay.
But here is where it gets really intense. Here's the divine obligation that seems to underpin the whole system. If God doesn't extend his grace,
Then no one could obey.
right, no creature could possibly obey the law or fulfill their created purpose, which means, logically, all would necessarily die, spiritually speaking.
Okay.
And now for the really strong language, the sources argue if a creature who God in his foreknowledge knows would have accepted grace if it had been offered, if that creature dies spiritually because God failed to provide that necessary grace, then God, the sources states starkly, becomes responsible for that death. He would become, in their words, a murderer.
Wow. Okay, hold on. Murderer. That's staggering language to apply to God.
It is. It's incredibly strong. But it frames the provision of grace not just as like a nice divine preference.
But as an absolute requirement.
An absolute requirement stemming from God's own perfect justice and love, conditional upon his foreknowledge of the creature's potential positive response.
So if God knows someone would say yes to grace,
He is ethically obligated by his own nature to offer it to them. The implication is that God must ensure grace is extended to those he foreknows would accept it. That's linked to 1 Corinthians 10:13, not being tempted beyond what you can bear, providing a way out.
because if he withheld it from someone he knew would accept.
He would be unjustly denying them the life he knew they were capable of choosing and achieving through his power.
Okay, so that connects foreknowledge directly to predestination or election.
Yep.
It's selection based on God knowing who, once empowered by the gift, would respond positively and strive towards him.
Exactly. Selection based on the foreseen positive response to the offered gift of grace.
All right, that explains the necessity of grace for the elect, those who respond. What about the flip side? The sources also talk about God providing sufficient grace even to those he knows will ultimately reject it. Like in 2 Chronicles 36, sending prophets again and again.
Despite knowing they wouldn't listen.
Right. If he knows the final answer is no, why waste the grace, so to speak? Why go through the motions?
Yes. Because it ties directly back to that absolute necessity of public judgment and divine transparency.
Ah, okay. It's for the observers again.
It's always partly for the observers. God provides sufficient grace to the rebellious enough light, enough opportunity, enough warnings precisely to ensure that they openly, repeatedly, and definitively choose their own destruction despite his goodness.
So there are no excuses later.
Exactly. It ensures that the neighboring creatures, the surrounding creation, the angelic hosts, everyone watching the unfolding drama, they witness, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that the rebellious creature chose death. They rejected God's ample provision.
So providing grace to the rebellious isn't primarily about hoping they'll change their mind, though maybe that's a component.
The primary purpose, given foreknowledge, seems to be demonstrative.
It's more about eliminating any possible defense they could offer or any accusation against God's character in the final judgment. It makes God's love and patience undeniable, even in condemnation.
It's the critical element that vindicates God before the entire cosmic court. And the ultimate purpose of all this transparency is foundational. Creatures must understand who God is.
His love, his justice, his patience.
All of it. They need to grasp the depths of his impartial love and the unbending demands of his absolute justice to be able genuinely to love him back and keep the commandments freely.
Because if God's nature stays hidden or seems arbitrary,
Then free will itself is ultimately a failure. No one could make a truly informed, loving choice. And the sources suggest in that scenario, all creation would eventually just spiral into confusion, rebellion, and death. Understanding God is paramount.
Okay, so we've walked through the creation, the fall, the 2 atoms, foreknowledge, free will, grace. Let's move towards the end game now. The completion, the glorification, focusing on those who do successfully respond to grace.
Right, the elect. Those who navigate the path successfully. The sources detail this process of predestination leading to conformity with Christ.
Yeah, talk about that sequence.
Absolutely. God, because he knew beforehand who would respond positively to his offered grace, he designated or predestined these specific individuals to be conformed to the image of his Son, Jesus Christ. That's Romans 8:29.
To look like him, spiritually.
Exactly. And these are the ones predestined for adoption as sons and daughters. Ephesians 1:4-5 talks about being chosen before the creation of the world, holy and blameless, predestined for adoption.
Wow, so the path, the sources lay it out step by step.
They do, famously in Romans 8:30. It's a logical sequence flowing from God's perspective. Foreknowledge, he knew them, leads to predestination. He designated their destiny, which flows into the calling. He invited them through the gospel. Followed by justification, he declared them righteous, forgiving them through the blood of the last Adam.
And the final step.
Culminating in ultimate glorification. That's the resurrection, the final redeemed state, fully conformed to Christ's image. A completed chain.
Okay. Now, the sources also bring in a very specific, almost numerical element to this completion plan, this idea of a scheduled harvest, the first fruits.
Yes, that's quite distinct. The sources make it clear that God seems to have predetermined a specific number, a quota almost, of martyr witnesses and first fruits. Revelation 6:9 mentions souls under the altar crying out, being told to wait until the full number of their fellow servants and brothers was complete.
A specific number to be reached.
It seems so. And they connect this to Old Testament patterns, like the feasts, noting that a harvest typically occurred 3 times annually. Exodus 23.14 mentions appearing before the Lord 3 times a year.
Suggesting maybe stages or waves of this spiritual harvest?
Perhaps. A pattern of increasing maturity or revelation culminating in a final harvest. And the sources get very specific about the number for the last group of these first fruits.
Which is?
The famous 144,000 from Revelation 14.3, a set specific number marking a key point in the plan.
That number, 144,000. It really suggests a highly structured, almost architectural component to this cosmic blueprint. Like, God isn't just gathering some people, he's filling a predetermined quota.
That seems to be the implication. It's not presented as an arbitrary cap, but maybe a fixed numerical goal that's necessary for the next stage, perhaps for the full spiritual inheritance or the establishment of the final unified eternal order.
Okay, so what is the ultimate goal? All this complexity, creation, fall, selection, grace, specific numbers, harvests, what's it all building towards?
The ultimate aim, according to Ephesians 1.10, is the unification of everything. All things in heaven and on earth brought together under one head. Christ, cosmic reconciliation and harmony.
Bringing it all together.
But critically, the church, the body of redeemed people gathered throughout history, plays a vital role even before that final unification. It serves as a kind of magnificent teaching tool.
For whom?
For the angels.
Whoa.
The church itself is the primary means by which God reveals his manifold wisdom, his incredibly complex and multifaceted plan to the principalities and powers in the heavenly realms. That's Ephesians 3.9.
Wow. So human history, our struggles, our redemption, it's like a live demonstration, a graduate-level seminar for the angelic host.
That's a fascinating way to put it. They're watching God's wisdom and power succeed in redeeming creatures much weaker, arguably, than themselves, who fell just as Lucifer did.
They see the plan working out.
Exactly. And because God is omnipresent, outside of time, sustaining all moments simultaneously, the sources remind us of a fundamental truth. From God's perspective, his will is already accomplished. It's certain.
Daniel 4.35, he does as he pleases. Ephesians 3.11, his eternal purpose.
Right. The completion is guaranteed from his end. We, within space-time, are simply watching the demonstration unfold sequentially. The movie's already finished. We're just watching it play out frame by frame.
And that demonstration reaches its climax, its final public unveiling, at the white throne judgment.
The ultimate public display. And this moment is absolutely essential for completing that whole process of validating free will and demonstrating God's character.
And the transparency there, the sources say, is total, absolute.
Nothing hidden. All creatures redeemed, condemned, angelic observers, everyone will stand before the judgment seat of Christ. Romans 14.10, we will all stand before God's judgment seat.
And the judgment isn't just a verdict, it's a full review.
A complete and utterly public review. Every careless word spoken, Matthew 12.35, every secret deed done, good or bad, Ecclesiastes 12.14, 6 Corinthians 5.10, it will all be brought out into the light.
But why? Why dredge up every single detail, especially the secrets? Seems harsh.
To definitively, publicly, and irrefutably demonstrate why each creature ended up where they did. Did they accept the grace, the pathway provided by the last Adam, or did they reject it? The evidence will be overwhelming.
No room for doubt, no lingering questions, no accusations against God.
Precisely. The public revelation eliminates any possibility of misunderstanding or perceived injustice. And the sources conclude that the observers, the surrounding creation, watching this final judgment, will fully accept and comprehend God's decisions. They will affirm his perfect love and his absolute justice. Revelation 20.12, the books were opened, judged according to what they had done.
The entire process, from creation in Hades to the White Throne, is designed to result in universal cosmic agreement about who God truly is.
Yes, total vindication of his character and his plan. Hashtag tag outro. So when we pull all these threads together, what does this complex tapestry really show us? What's the big picture from these sources?
Yeah, synthesizing it all.
It seems to map out this incredible structure where the failures of the first Adam weren't, divine plan B. They weren't accidents.
Well, they were necessary, structural even.
Exactly. Necessary structural elements. They provided the crucial negative context, the problem statement, if you will, that was essential for the last Adam to then step in and complete creation.
And in doing so, confirm God's justice and love.
Right. Through this whole intricate process involving foreknowledge, the ethical necessity of offering grace, and this non-negotiable requirement for public accountability, public judgment.
So the ultimate takeaway for you listening, for the learner trying to grasp this,
Yeah.
it seems the entire cosmos, this whole sweep of history, was deliberately structured to fix that apparent clash, that tension between God knowing everything and us still having real autonomy.
Yeah, resolving that paradox seems key.
And the completion of our free will, making it meaningful and validated, hinges entirely on the transparent public revelation of God's true nature, his love, his justice, his wisdom to everyone watching.
The fall, the cross, the offer of grace, the final judgment, they're all interconnected parts of one long cosmic demonstration.
A demonstration designed to secure the genuine eternal love of his creatures by removing any possible grounds for misunderstanding him, making his goodness undeniable.
Which leaves us with, well, a pretty challenging final thought to chew on, doesn't it?
Go for it.
If this deep dive shows that God's entire plan, including the fall and the meticulous provision of grace, was designed to ensure that every single creature's final status, saved or lost, is seen by all onlookers as a definite, uncoerced choice,
Okay.
then what new level of awareness, maybe even responsibility, does that insight place on those of us who are called right now to testify to that same love and justice today? In the middle of this ongoing cosmic demonstration, how does knowing the audience and the stakes change how we live and speak?
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely something to take with you, a profound question. We've done the deep dive.
We have.
Now it's your turn to process the gold.